So up until this point, we've been doing things like this function here, get a random int. What it's doing is you put in a minimum and a maximum number, and somebody wrote this random int function, and we're including it with the random import library, and it would pass back a number between A and B, okay? But it turns out there's other ways you could run this function. There is actually this optional parameter that exists that says step. So say I put in 0 to 10. It could give me a number between 0 and 10. But say I only want even numbers. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I could put in a step of 2, and that would give me all the even numbers. Now, you don't have to put this in. If you don't, the default value is 1, which makes sense. That's what we would normally assume it would be. So this is called an optional parameter. We also saw this when we were doing the problem where we had the print statement, which is itself a function that somebody wrote, and we didn't want the enter character to be automatically put at the end. And we put comma, end is assigned, and we put nothing inside quotes. So by default, print always puts a return character at the end for us, which makes logical sense. But we can override that if we want and put anything we want at the end. So that is another example of an optional parameter. So the question is, if other people can have these default values, could we write a function that has a default value? And the answer is absolutely you can. So what does that look like in syntax? So turns out not everybody in the world actually has a middle name. So my dad's from England, and the strange place from England where he comes from, they literally don't have middle names. They just have first names and last names, that's it. Some strange tradition, don't know why. So when you're getting somebody's name and you want to give their formal name, if they don't have a middle name, you can't like put the sort of single character in the middle. It has to be blank. So here I have a function called full name. And this is a function that I've written in my program, okay? And it accepts either first name, last name, and middle name, or you'll notice the exact same function can just accept first and last name. And by default, it will give you the middle name of nothing, because you don't have a middle name. It will just be totally blank, okay? So what does this function, oh, actually, just before we do that, you'll notice I'm getting, it's not an error, because it's not red, but you'll notice this thing has blue squiggly lines, okay? So if you hover over it, and you'll notice comparison, middle name does not equal none. So I'm checking if the middle name is not empty. That's really what I'm checking, right? Should be middle name is not none. So instead of using this, they want us to use is not instead. So it's just a Python, another way of creating a Boolean expression. Remember, we were used to using equal, greater than, less than, greater than, equal than, like these normal symbols. It turns out you can use is not. That's a valid Boolean operator. So if you just replace this with what's there, you'll notice that will go away. So if you ever see is not, that's just a Boolean equation, just like we've always done. Okay, just a different way of doing it. Okay, so I want to look at this function, and you'll notice when I hover over it, I get some nice information, and I get this information because I wrote my function correctly. I still are getting people that are not doing type hints and are not including a document string. They're just doing a regular comment. Now, Python's perfectly happy with you not doing type hints. It could care less, actually, the interpreter. It doesn't use it at all, okay? But the IDE uses it so that when somebody else hovers over your function, they can get information, okay? So I know that the first thing that's being passed in should be a string. The second thing should be a string, And look at this. The third thing should be a string, but its currently default value is none. And it's going to pass back a string, and the full name function calculates the full formal name and returns a string. So make sure you see all these things, and then when I go up to my actual definition of my function, this is where it's coming from, okay? From here, 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 and this is how you set a default value. So you say the type is assigned and whatever the default value is. So in the print command, the person that wrote it, the default ending character, END, is actually a return character. Okay, so /n. For random integer, the step is an integer and it's assigned to 1. But you could change it and make it 2 or 7 or whatever you want. Okay, so this assigning and a value, that is how you create a default value. And we know that it should be returning a string because of the type int right here. Okay? So what I did is I took first name and I assigned it to this variable. Then I'm checking if middle name is not none, just like we learned. And if it's not none, then I actually do have a middle name. And what this thing is going to do, we're going to talk about this more next unit. It's grabbing the first character of your middle name. Okay, so my middle name is John, so it's going to just grab the J. Okay, and then it takes my last name and adds it in. So it's going to take Patrick J Coxell and return it there. Okay, so it takes your middle name and just grabs the first letter and then puts a period after it. Okay, so I'm just going to put a breakpoint right here. And we'll run this. Okay, so my first name is Patrick. Do I have a middle name? So I'm going to run it yes the first time. So I put in yes. So, I'm going to have, why is this not going to work? So I put in Y, but I made a mistake. Why is it not going to work? Oh, it is, because I did upper. I thought it was going to have to use capital Y. So it should take the Y and upperize it and then compare it. So it should work. There we go. So now it's going to ask me for my middle name. And now it's going to ask me for my last name. Now, middle name is not none because it actually has a value. So it's going to use this version where it passes in the middle name. Now that we're here, remember that middle name by default was none, but I actually passed in John. So now it's going to concatenate everything together. Yes, I have a middle name. It's going to grab that single letter and then put a period after it. So that worked well. And then it passes it back. And then it's just going to print it out. Okay, so that worked for when I have a middle name. Now if I do the exact same thing and pretend that I don't have a middle name, we should be stopped here. There we go. So this should skip asking me my middle name. Okay, now it's going to ask me my last. Middle name is none, okay, because I didn't have one this time. So it's going to go to the second version, and notice middle name actually has none in it. So it's going to skip this part completely. Oop, just hops over it. And then it returns it and prints it out, and we're good to go. Okay, so that's how you can create a function that has a default value. You can or cannot choose to put it in. The only other thing to remember is, by convention, the default values are usually the last parameter. Okay, you wouldn't do first name, default value, middle name, and then last name. Because if you just put 2 in, it's going to assume that the last name is actually the middle one, right? So default ones always go at the end.